I had one.
Who perpetrated the terrorist attack, and what changed on September 11, 2001? It's the beginning of the 21st century. The world seems relatively stable, especially for the United States. The Cold War is over. Its main rival, the Soviet Union, disappeared almost 10 years ago. The United States is the only superpower confident in its security and influence. But this confidence is only superficial. In the 1990s, a new threat emerged in the shadows. The radical Islamist network Al-Qaeda, founded by Osama bin Laden, gradually transformed into a global force. Who is he? Bin Laden comes from a wealthy Saudi Arabian family and fought in the Afghan war against Soviet troops in the 1980s. It was there, amidst the war and ideological mobilization, that his worldview was formed, a blend of radical Islam and the idea of global jihad. After the war, he did not return to civilian life. On the contrary, he began a fight against a new enemy. Why West? In the eyes of bin Laden and his supporters, the United States is a power that maintains a military presence on holy soil, American bases in Saudi Arabia after the Gulf War, intervenes in Middle Eastern politics, and supports opponents of Muslim movements. In 1996 and again in 1998, he publicly declared jihad against the United States and its allies. And these weren't just words. Attacks followed. The bombings of the American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. Attack on the USS Cole in 2000. There were signals, there were warnings, but they seemed distant, happening out there. By 2001, the threat already existed. It was growing, organizing, learning, and most importantly, it was preparing for a blow that would change the world. 8:46 a.m. The first blow. Flight 11 crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. At first, it's perceived as a tragic accident. People try to understand what happened. Cameras begin to flock to the scene. 9:03 a.m. The second strike. Flight 175 crashes into the South Tower. At this point, it becomes clear, this was no accident, but a coordinated attack. 9:37 a.m. The third plane hits the Pentagon near Washington. The attack extends beyond New York City. It's a strike on the country's military center. 10:03 a.m. Flight 93, the fourth plane, crashes into a field in Pennsylvania. It later became known that the passengers attempted to regain control of the plane, thwarting the terrorists' plan. How it was organized, this synchronicity was based on precise coordination. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the Al-Qaeda chief architect of the operation, played a key role. The plan is based on several principles. Division into groups, each hijacking team operated independently within its own aircraft. Kamikaze pilots, these included trained pilots who took control after the hijacking. Timing, the flights were timed so that the planes would be in the air over the US East Coast at nearly the same time. Minimal communication during the attack. Once the hijacking began, no communication between the teams was required. Everything had been planned in advance.
George W. Bush was at an elementary school in Florida when he was informed of the second strike. It was then that it became clear, this was no accident, but a coordinated attack. He maintained a calm demeanor in front of the cameras, but almost immediately security protocols began, with the president being moved between secure facilities.
An emergency evacuation of key buildings begins. White House, U.S. Capitol, some of the leadership is transferred to secure bunkers and backup command posts. This is being done in case of further attacks. At that point, no one understood the scale of the threat. Shutting down the skies, 9:42. The Federal Aviation Administration makes an unprecedented decision, completely shutting down U.S. airspace. All aircraft in the air are ordered to land immediately. All flights are canceled. Civil aviation is effectively grounded. For the first time in the country's history, the skies become nearly empty, a symbol of how serious the threat was considered. The September 11th attacks killed 2,977 people. These weren't just numbers, they represented thousands of lives lost in a single morning. Among them, airplane passengers, office workers in the World Trade Center, military and civilian personnel in the Pentagon, and hundreds of rescue workers, firefighters, police officers, and paramedics. The New York Fire Department suffered particularly heavy losses. Hundreds of rescuers died climbing the towers while others were descending. Wells Crowther, he was 24 years old. He was working in one of the towers, but when the impact occurred, he didn't immediately run down. Instead, he began helping others escape. People later recalled a stranger in a red bandana directing them to the exit and returning for more groups. He saved dozens of lives, but he himself did not survive. Betty Ong, she was a flight attendant on the first hijacked plane. She was the one who contacted air traffic controllers and relayed key information, that the plane had been hijacked, that there were wounded, and what was happening on board. Her calm and precise reporting helped them understand the scale of what was happening, even before the towers were hit. The September 11th attacks were not only a tragedy but also a turning point. The consequences affected politics, security, and the daily lives of millions of people. As early as October 2001, the United States began operations in Afghanistan. The goal was to destroy Al-Qaeda and overthrow the regime that harbored it. 2 years later, the Iraq War began, 2003. Officially, it was launched due to suspicions of weapons of mass destruction and links to terrorism. These grounds would later spark serious controversy and criticism. These conflicts lasted for years and defined international politics in the early 21st century. The USA Patriot Act is passed domestically. It expanded the powers of intelligence agencies, access to personal data and communications, increased surveillance of suspects, lowering barriers to interagency information sharing. Critics believe this has led to an increase in mass surveillance and challenged the balance between security and freedom. The Transportation Security Administration, TSA, is created. It was from this point that the measures we know today began to emerge. Strict baggage screening, liquid restrictions, body scanners, mandatory shoe removal at airports. Flying ceases to be simple. Security becomes the #1 priority. Social consequences. One side effect is growing mistrust and hostility toward Muslims and people of Middle Eastern descent, a phenomenon known as Islamophobia. Hate crimes have increased, public fear has intensified, complex debates have arisen about the limits of tolerance and security. Result: September 11th changed not only politics, it changed the very logic of the world. Wars became preventative and global. Security increased, but at the expense of privacy. Everyday things, like flying, became part of a system of control. It was a moment from which the world never returned to its previous state. Today, the National September 11th Memorial and Museum stands on the site of the destroyed towers in New York City. 2 enormous pools follow the contours of the towers, and the names of all the victims are engraved along their edges. Every year on September 11th, memorial ceremonies are held. The names of the victims are read. A moment of silence is observed at the moment of impact. Families, rescuers, and ordinary people gather together. A separate symbol is the tribute and light event, 2 beams of light rising into the sky at the site of the towers. The memory of September 11th isn't just about the tragedy. It's about people, about choices, about consequences.